All right.
Okay. I would now like to call the August 20th, 2025 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. Could we please start with a roll call?
Yes, Robert Davidson,
Here.
Porkett Oneron,
Here.
Ethan Augreen,
Here.
Alex Solomeo,
Here.
Jeff Garrick,
Here.
Alyssa Harding.
Here.
Daniel Leonard is not able to join us today. For staff members, we have Lisa Knobloch.
Here.
Susan Bartlett.
Here.
Adam Sanderson is on the call too. I don't think I have permissions for him yet. And Heather McIntyre is here. Becky Doyle will be joining us in a little while, as will Councilmember Popkin. But Chair, you have a quorum.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I will start off with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the First Peoples have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure these injustices do not happen again. And our inclusion statement. The Sustainability Advisory Board embraces diverse perspectives from its members and the public. To create an inclusive space where everyone feels welcome to share their opinions, the board asks that all attendees listen and speak with respect and avoid attacks on individuals or specific group identities. All right, the first item up on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anyone have any changes or corrections that need to be made? Okay, hearing none, is there anyone who would like to make a motion to approve those amendments? Approve the minutes. All right, Corkett, move. A second from anyone?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Okay. Is that unit? All those opposed? I think I heard an aye from you, Alec, there.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Were there any staff items that we needed to change the agenda to account for?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. Well, our first item of general business, before we dive into it, I kind of wanted to briefly mention that after reviewing some of our past meetings and minutes, we sometimes have a tendency to drift a bit from the topic at hand, and I'm going to try to do a little bit better job of ensuring that we stay within that lane, and especially in the general business times when we have often have guests here to try to introduce some information to us. If we have some other topics that we want to bring up later after that, we could certainly use the items from the board period to do that. So I'll try to do that a little bit better than I have in the past. And yeah, I just wanted to give that context. So our first item for general business is a building code scenario analysis recommendations. And Lisa, I think you're going to take us through that.
Yeah. Yep. Buckle up. I don't know if you'll hopefully had a chance to look at your packets. I just want to preface this by saying that this is very technical. It's a very complicated topic with lots of bits and pieces. If it felt very overwhelming for you all to look at that report, that's totally fine. Even Susan and I, who've been very steeped in this, are overwhelmed by some of that information as well. So Susan is here also. We will do our best to answer if you have technical questions, and I am going to pre-apologizing if you have technical questions that I can't answer. I will try to get answers for you. But we did provide like a summary brief that tried to at least summarize the main options that are on the table. So you all didn't have to wade through all of that other information, but just wanted to give a preface with that. So I do have a presentation that I will jump into here. Let's see, I always have to click more.
Lisa, can you turn up your audio just a little bit?
Maybe. I don't know how to turn up my own audio. How do I do that? I know how to turn up the volume, but I'm not sure how to turn up my audio.
There it went.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. Okay. I just scooted little bit closer, hopefully.
Turn it down a little bit.
Okay, great. If I start to get quiet again, please let me know. Okay, can you all see this presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. There we go. Are you seeing a give subtitles a try box, or is that just for me? Okay. Okay, so I'll get into some background for you all, but this has been quite a long adventure, I would say, getting to this point. So I'll do my best to get into that. But we are going to City Council with these options next week on Tuesday, the 26th. And so we did want to have an opportunity to bring this information to you all first to get some discussion and feedback that we can take to that City Council meeting. The reason we are here talking to you about building code adoption options is a couple of reasons. So first and foremost, on April 9th of 2024, Mayor Peck made a motion that our City Council approved, which provided direction for staff to prepare options for electrification in new residential and commercial development after the new international building codes were received. And when I say electrification, I'm talking about building electrification. So really transitioning the appliances in our homes to move from natural gas to, thank you, to electric appliances. Bigger picture goals that we have are from the sustainability plan, which identified greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets, which are listed here, 66% by 2030, 69% by 2050, based on a 2016 baseline. That's a lot of numbers, but our primary sectors of building emissions come from electricity, natural gas, and transportation. So yes, Alyssa, did you have a question?
Are we navigating through this deck with you, or are we still on the title slide? Because you're giving some background context, and I'm thinking there's a slide for it, but
The slides didn't advance for you?
I'm not seeing it.
No, it did not.
Oh,
We have your view where you can see the presentation on the right and then all the slides on the left.
okay.
So if you stop sharing the
Yeah.
screen that you have,
Yes, if I can do it. Okay. Thank you so much for letting me know that. I would have just gone on and on. Okay. Let me try again.
I thought you had all that memorized, Lisa. So
Thank you. Okay. Oh, there we go. Always have to hit share twice. Is that better?
yes,
Give background.
thank you.
Perfect. Okay, great. So the mayor's motion, which I mentioned, are sustainability plan greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets. So our primary sectors of emissions are electricity, natural gas, and transportation. So that drives a lot of the climate-oriented part of what we do. We do a lot of other stuff that also supports climate resilience and adaptation and broader aspects of sustainability. So I want to acknowledge there's a lot of work, but when we talk about our greenhouse gas goals, that's primarily what our focus areas are. And then in 2020, we had the Climate Action Recommendations report that tasked us with accelerating that action and develop a beneficial building electrification plan to really identify strategies for driving down those emissions from natural gas. So our strategy for reducing our emissions from the electricity sector is our transitioning our grid to 100% renewable. These building codes are a primary way of transitioning or driving down our emissions from natural gas. And then we also have a city policy on maintaining updated building codes. And so that's an internal policy that we have followed for many years that says we will adopt all or part of a whole list of different codes with local amendments where appropriate within 1 year of promulgation, which is legal language to say once it's final and published, that we will adopt those within a year. Just for reference, the 2024 International Building Codes were published, including the full package in August of 2024. So in the beneficial building electrification plan, and this is going deep for y'all for a minute, so just bear with me. That called for updating those building codes to include electrification. As I mentioned, that's a primary strategy to reduce our emissions from natural gas, but to do that in alignment with the regional code cohort recommendations. And the regional code cohort was a group of folks that came together across Boulder County and some other jurisdictions. It was funded by DOLA. What we've heard a lot from our contractor and development community is that it's really hard to work across communities because we all have different code requirements. We are all trying to reach ambitious climate goals. And so this was a way to create that consistency across the region. And so our city council said, yes, it makes sense for us to do that in alignment. Go ahead and wait till those recommendations are done, and then we'll look at those. Those were done in 2023, and we took them back to city council to say, here they are. And at that time, it started pushing up against when we anticipated the 2024 codes being available. And again, going back to that city policy that says we have to adopt those within a year of promulgation or published. So at that time, city council said, okay, we don't want to adopt codes now and have to adopt codes in another 6 or 12 months. That's a huge lift for staff. It's confusing for our community. Let's just wait till the 2024 codes come out, and we will look at those alongside the code cohort recommendations. But then this 2024 codes were significantly delayed. So we anticipated them coming out in early 2024. They didn't come out until August. And what that did was push the 2024 codes up against a state process that was underway, in which the state was developing what's called the Low Energy and Carbon Code, which becomes the state minimum code in 2026. So then we had all of these code options that were essentially overlapping in timing. And in order for our council to make the most informed decision on what was the best code scenario for our community, again, to meet the needs of our contractor and development community, to make sure that we weren't overburdening our planning staff and our building services staff that have to do all of this work, they gave us direction to hold until all of those options were completed. So the Low Energy and Carbon Code from the state and the code cohort were revising their recommendations to address some legal constraints that I will talk about. So I know that's a lot, but that is what brings us to where we are today. And so we now have 3 code scenarios that are all completed, that we worked with a consultant to analyze. So again, we can take all of this information to our city council and they can make an informed decision. So the three code scenarios on the table are the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code, the Colorado Model Low Energy and Carbon Code, which will become a state requirement next year, and then the regional code cohort, which meets the state's requirement and goes above and beyond that. A little more details of the Low Energy and Carbon Code. It was completed in May by the Colorado Energy Code Board, which was a group of folks from a number of different industries from across the state. And it's going to be published September 1st. The priorities that were this was called for in state legislation that was passed in 2022, was to minimize overall CO2 emissions associated with new and renovated homes and commercial buildings, maintaining affordable housing. So that was a really key component in making sure that in our effort to transition to building electrification, we maintained affordability to the extent that we can, and then provide pathways for both all electric and mixed fuel buildings, so gas and electric, with a preference for all electric. So again, there's now legal constraints where there's litigation happening in other cities and states for communities that have tried to say that we are only requiring electric pathways. We are not allowing for pathways for gas. And this becomes the new state minimum for any municipality that is adopting any building code on or after July 1st of 2026, with a drop dead deadline of January 1st of 2030. So anytime after July 1st of 2026 that we do anything with building code, we are going to be required to adopt the low energy and carbon code or something more stringent. The code cohort, again, the purpose of that was to create this unified approach to energy code to simplify for builders. That's also simplified for our staff. To look at creating a stronger impact across our whole region. It meets and exceeds the low energy and carbon code. They worked really hard on simplifying and developing model stretch code language for jurisdictions that adopt the code cohort recommendations. And it was done in collaboration with member jurisdictions, and it also created a roadmap from now to 2030. So it's not just looking at the 2024 code cycle, but it also has recommendations for 2027 and 2030. We worked with a consultant from an engineering firm called Group 14 to model the impact of those three code scenarios against our current code, which is the 2021 code with some amendments. So these are the 4 scenarios that they analyzed, and this is what you see in the report should you want to go deep into the numbers. And then they developed recommendations for us based on predicted first and annual costs. So the first costs are the cost to construct that building type in the first place. And then annual cost is the cost to actually run that building based on the appliances that are utilized. And that was based on information from local developers. So we did a survey of local developers to get actual cost information for our community and from our region, so that we weren't just making overly broad estimates on those cost factors. We also looked at energy use intensity, which is essentially the efficiency of those appliances and equipment, greenhouse gas emissions, and then overall ease of implementation. How complicated is it to actually implement for both our staff and for developers and contractors? So these are the codes that were analyzed and the components, the primary components that were included. There were more details, but these are the key pieces for the context of our conversation. So it looked at compliance pathways, electrification, performance pathway, home size, and demand response. And this is where I'm going to tell you if you start asking me questions on these slides. I can speak to some of them and my brain has been in another space. So I'm going to lean on Susan to jump in here if she can. But again, the base 2024 IECC has both prescriptive and performance pathways. The low energy and carbon code did not make any changes to that. The cohort added an additional pathway, which is called passive house, which is like an extremely efficient housing type that is the most energy efficient housing type that you can build. On the electrification side, the 2024 IECC didn't really include any additional building electrification, like electrification preferred options. In the low energy and carbon code, they looked specifically at what's called fuel debiasing. This is getting very jargony. That's essentially just saying previously in earlier iterations of international code, what they've done is compared the efficiency of gas appliances to other gas appliances rather than comparing all appliances across the board. And so that fuel debiasing is essentially saying when we look at efficiency, we should look at prioritizing appliances that are the most efficient regardless of fuel type. And then added an electric preferred option. And then the code cohort is just more strongly trying to prioritize electrification. On the performance pathway, the International Energy Conservation Code uses energy cost as a performance metric. And in both the low energy and carbon code and code cohort, it changes that to energy use or energy use intensity, which again is like the efficiency of appliances. The code cohort kept that. And this is the home size is less applicable to Longmont. This is really looking at like mountain and resort communities, but they did add additional requirements across the board for larger homes. And the code cohort made it more stringent for homes above 3,500 square feet or 5,000 square feet. That's not very applicable to Longmont. We don't typically have homes that size in Longmont. And then demand response was not included in the 2024 IECC, and in the low energy and carbon code, it's required for water heating. And then in the code cohort, it's required for water heating, space heating, and cooling. On the commercial side, it's very similar. I want to pull out, let's see if there's any real differences here. The only difference is in the commercial side, the low energy and carbon code did include demand response requirements for water heating, space heating, and lighting. And they included this component around renewable energy. In the 2024 IECC, they were requiring commercial buildings to include on-site renewable energy. The low energy and carbon code removed that requirement largely because our grid is already quite a bit cleaner in Colorado and in Longmont than in other places. And the code cohort kept that recommendation of removing that requirement for renewable energy. So the consultant we worked with Group 14 looked at 4 building types based on information we got from our planning department on what are the most common building types we see in development in Longmont. Like there's a number of different building types we could model, but we wanted to model what are we seeing the most development of in Longmont. And then within each of those building types, they modeled 4 options as far as system types. I'm sorry, I'm getting super technical here. And within those 4 system types, there were 2 gas or mixed fuel options and 2 fully electric options. I'm not going to get into all of the details of each of those. I don't think you all needed to know that. If you want me to get into it, I will. But just so you know, each of those building types had 4 system types, 2 gas or mixed fuel, 2 all electric. The residential model was based on 3 townhomes of 1,600 square feet each. Again, that's because that's in that space, we're in the kind of single family space, that's most of the development we're seeing. This would be pretty similar if we were modeling a single family detached home. So we are kind of getting that question from folks, but it would be very similar to the numbers that we are seeing from a townhome, other than we would have a little bit more exterior envelope space. They modeled multifamily, which consisted of 4 stories and 48,000 square feet of conditioned floor area. They modeled a retail space involving a 90,000 square foot strip mall with a cafe and quick service restaurant, and then a flex industrial building type, which would include 625,000 square feet with 25,000 square feet of office space. And the one thing I just want to note on that one is the requirements in the code are applicable only to the office space, not to the industrial portion of the flex industrial space. We are not looking at requiring electrification of industrial or manufacturing facilities. They are not there yet from a technology standpoint. So it's really only looking at the office space of those buildings. I'm going to pause for questions before I move on. That's a lot to absorb. If you all have questions, please feel free to just jump in because I can't see people's hands.
No one
Lisa,
seems
do you
to
want
be
to
raising
maybe
their
just
hands.
stop sharing for a minute? So during the discussion piece?
Oh, there's more.
I know, but do you want to just stop sharing during the discussion piece?
Sure. Okay. I just didn't want to mess up and not be able to reshare later. So, okay, but now I can see folks. Robert, did you have a question?
No, I was just letting you know that no one seemed to be raising their hand or anything. So,
Okay. All right. There will be time for more questions later if you think of something. So, okay, I'm going to share again. Okay.
I do have a question.
Oh yeah, go for it.
All right, being in the energy generation space, this is definitely a different year. So I'm curious about kind of federal impacts. I know there's been talk of re-upping natural gas generation and coal generation, specifically in Colorado. So, electrification, using fossil fuels is a factor in this because it's the side. So I'm just curious if there's been any talk, any pause because of that kind of policy and that kind of transition in kind of thought from certain
Yeah.
groups. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the conversation that we are having to have because the landscape is different. I will say that as member owners, and I'll look to Susan to jump in if she wants to add anything, but as member owners of Platte River Power Authority, we have a lot more control over that transition, and we're already at close to 50% renewable. The numbers that are in the report, and I'll show you a summary slide in just a second, takes into account exactly what you're saying. So if we are modeling the impacts of electrification, it's based on the current energy mix today, which does include gas and it does include coal. We know those numbers are going to get better as the grid gets cleaner. What is in question for us, I think at the moment is definitely whether or not there would be push from the federal side to slow any of that transition. But again, we're part owners of Platte River Power Authority, which are not governed in the same way. And so I think that would be less likely for us, and it's not going to go backwards from where we're at now. I mean, the renewables that we have acquired, we've acquired those, right? So I'm gonna lean on Susan if you want to jump in and share anything about that. That's kind of a non-answer because there's a lot of unknowns at this point, I would say.
I would say it's a good answer because the modeling, as Lisa said, is based on our current emissions factor, which is representative of what's happening right now. And then I would just throw in that despite all the uncertainty, Platte River has a plan and it's moving forward with that plan until something changes the direction otherwise. But if you're in energy, you probably understand how hard it is to change direction, and especially once something has been developed and the projections have been made and the investments have begun. So, I see us heading down the path that we're on.
Thanks, Susan. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yes, thank you so much.
So based on all of that, sorry.
Lisa,
Yes,
one quick question from me as well.
Mm-hmm.
I did attend the renewable energy session that Susan and PRPA co-hosted last week, and I thought it was really interesting to hear about their plans, but I'm also wondering if there's a trade-off here between rapid electrification and long-term resilience. And from my read-through of the cohort, it kind of looked like that there may be the potential that we may be trading off long-term resilience for faster electrification today, right? Like maybe using more energy, higher operating costs if we think about access and affordability to our citizens. They may be less grid flexible, like the demand. I'm just thinking about like a retrofit burden for the future, basically. Like, are we shooting ourselves in the foot by pushing forward with a more rapid decarbonization through electrification priority versus thinking bigger picture about what we might need to balance?
Yeah, those are great questions. I'll speak to some of the access and affordability pieces kind of first, because that was absolutely part of this process to look at both first cost, like how much is it going to cost to build these things to begin with, and then annual costs, like operating costs, like how much is it going to cost compared to what people pay today with our current code. And I'll get into that a minute with some of those results, but I'm going to let Susan jump in because I think the long-term resilience piece is absolutely from a balancing load and grid impacts in this piece. I'm going to let Susan jump into that and speak to that.
Sure. And we're always looking at impacts to our capacity and our ability to deliver. Um, the one point to note about the code cohort and to some degree the low energy and carbon code is that they do include demand response. There are demand response requirements, and demand response as opposed to load management, which is what's included in the 2024 IECC, gives end users control versus having direct utility control. And so we see the demand response components with the code cohort option as providing our customers with that flexibility and also providing the opportunity for some grid resilience in circumstances where we may be more challenged. And something else to consider here is this is all for new construction and major renovation. So in new construction where we're kind of adding new right-sized capacity, we don't have a lot of concern with that at this point. Where our concerns would be in major renovation infill, where we have easement constraints, and we may have constraints on existing distribution infrastructure like transformers. But again, we're also looking at new construction, which is kind of a fraction of our total building stock, if you will. So it's a small portion compared to existing buildings. I'm not sure if that's answering your question or not, but we see it as a benefit if we manage it well, which means we need to be aware of how the codes can change, what's happening in those new kind of greenfield areas versus what's happening in infill areas.
Yeah, because I also think was Golden was a member of the cohort, or is there? I was reading up, and I don't know if Denver was part of this, but Denver developed something that seems similar. Like, do we have other cities who are already implementing something where they've got that sort of two-pronged approach of the grid infrastructure as well as the building code revisions?
Let me jump in here because I think we're drifting a little away from like the
Sorry,
pause in the
Robert.
presentation at this point. No worries. Like I want us to make sure we get through all this because I think we were pausing for questions about some of the background that have been done. I think this is all good conversation, but let's get to some of the recommendations and see.
Yeah, and it is a great question. Those are really good questions. And just quickly on that, in the regional code cohort report that I included for you all in your packet, it has a list of the member jurisdictions. Denver was not part of that. They have done their own thing. One of the things that does set Longmont apart, I think, is that we are one of the few communities that, sorry, my screen's doing a weird thing. It is our own, we have our own electric co-op and are trying to do these codes. I mean, Fort Collins, any of the Platte River communities. So Fort Collins is ahead of us, I would say, on this. But yeah, we can circle back to that as well and kind of dig deeper into that. But thank you for bringing those up. So the options that are on the table as far as this analysis goes, again, were the 2024 base code, the International Energy Conservation Code. Looking at lots of spreadsheets and lots of numbers, which our Group 14 rep did far more than Susan and I did, but looking at those three primary components, cost, both first cost and operating costs, our climate, so which are the ones that have the biggest impact on our climate goals, and then the ease of implementation. The 2024 IECC generally speaking, performed the worst across those three areas. So they had it had the highest first and annual costs when we looked at those 4 building types and those 4 system types. They had the lowest impact to our climate goals, and they were very complicated, which also has an adverse impact on our staff time. The more complicated these are, they're more complicated for our staff to review. and it's more difficult for our contractor and development community to comply and for us to enforce. So there's a lot of things that are wrapped up in those things being complicated. Two others, what I would say are strikes against that is that if we did go that route now, we would still need to adopt solar and electric ready provisions from the previous state minimum requirements, which we didn't do the last go round. We did for the residential, but not commercial. So we would need to pick that up. But then it doesn't meet the low energy and carbon code as the new state minimum in 2026. So if we went this route, which we could, whenever we adopt codes again after July 1st of 2026, we would have to adopt the low energy and carbon code or something more stringent. So it would be an interim step that would be a big lift, and it would only last for a short amount of time. And again, it's higher cost, lower impact on climate, and complicated. So we kind of feel like that one's a no-go. The low energy and carbon code and the code cohort had very similar outcomes as far as cost. So first cost and annual costs, very similar in their climate impacts in terms of meeting our climate goals. However, the low energy and carbon code is pretty complicated. Again, it adds that staff time and difficulty in compliance and enforcement for our contractor and development community. Whereas the code cohort really went above and beyond to make sure that they simplified the code, which makes it a whole lot easier. It reduces our staff time. It's easier for compliance and enforcement. And so that really tipped the scales to us recommending the code cohort. And we also get that regional consistency piece, which, as I mentioned at the very beginning, is something that we've heard is a point of frustration for the folks in the development community. So I was gonna advance. There we go. So this is where we landed as a recommendation would be to move forward with the code cohort recommendations. Our consultant provided some additional amendments to the code cohort amendments. Sorry for using that word too many times. They're listed here. So they identified ways in which we could drive greater efficiency, which would have an even bigger impact on our climate goals, and provide additional simplification. And so that's highlighting the air barrier compliance within the code, assigning higher points to lighting power density requirements. So that was kind of a miss in this area that has a pretty significant impact. Amending a certain section to allow multiple building types to comply with that section. And then moving those demand response controls to optional credits rather than required credits, because that does lead, that actually was driving the cost up quite a bit. And it's really reliant on customer participation. So figuring out how to move that into optional and then kind of put it on us, and Susan, correct me if I'm misspeaking here, for us to then encourage through incentives or otherwise folks to adopt those demand response controls.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then minimizing complexity for developers and energy code reviewers by developing compliance pathways for all typical construction types, what we're calling pathways on a platter. So essentially making it easy for folks to see if you follow this, if you're this construction type, follow this path and you're good. And then also requiring some standard compliance forms and reports to just make it easier for permitting. Real quick, I'll go back to the slide really quick because I did want to speak really to your comment, Alyssa, because I didn't break these first and annual comment or costs out. What we are seeing is that even though there is an increased first cost, so there's generally an increased cost of construction, but there's a savings on an annual cost basis in both the low energy and carbon code and the code cohort requirements. And so it absolutely is a barrier that we want to acknowledge up front, that we need to address that barrier. There are incentives and other resources available that we can tap into to bring those first costs down, especially if we're talking about affordable and attainable housing. And that's an important part of our conversation. But once we get those buildings built, the people living in those houses or working in those spaces enjoy reduced utility bills. And then there's also other like health benefits from indoor air quality and whatnot from transitioning to electric appliances. And so we do think, especially from an equity standpoint, that is a really important place for us to get to if we can get over those first cost barriers. And then the other thing I want to note is anytime there's a code update, generally speaking, there are cost increases. So that is a factor that's just kind of a nature of that particular beast. But so that is the presentation. I want to offer some time for discussion and feedback, and then I'll just go over some quick next steps for you all to know what's up in our process next. Yeah, Corkit.
Thank you for presentation, and it's a really complex issue, and we have really limited time to absorb and understand. And with that, I'd like to, the cohort recommendation, I agree. One thing that really I'm trying to understand and kind of raising questions is the air barrier. In our climate, it is important to provide a good envelope, but not as important as the cooler areas. It's more important to get the passive. I mean, one thing I'm trying to understand in this whole equation is that, cohort brings the passive. How does that compete with the air barrier requirements? So what I would suggest, the consultants' recommendations, that air barrier is a red flag for me. Because the more we wrap the building, the more we're reducing the passive gain. See, the kind of insulation we're using on the walls actually works against the passive gain. So I couldn't find anything much about what the cohort is talking about, that passive model.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear more and see more what they're saying, but hearing that makes me really hopeful. Wow, somebody's paying attention to that. So that's why I kind of raised that question about the air barrier.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. I don't know, Susan, if that's something that's getting into building science stuff that is probably outside of my wheelhouse, but Susan, I don't know if you, or Adam, I know you have a lot of building science expertise too, not to put you on the spot, but.
I'm not sure I can add much to the conversation here. And I do know that Robert raised his hand, but the air infiltration and the air barrier components of all of the codes is very complicated, and sort of adjusting in one area creates a problem in another area. And Corkit, is that what you're
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine a brick wall heated by the sun and gives heat back to the house. Any insulation you put inside or outside makes it harder.
Yeah.
If you need insulation, you put outside so that the radiator inside heats the wall and keeps the heat in the unit. But if we start asking for more insulation and more tightness in the envelope, the less we can appreciate the passive gain. That's the problem. And we are in a very lucky climate that can really increase the, quite honestly, I don't know, 70% of the time we open the windows. So, that airtight is not only expensive, not only creates, air quality issues, but also works against the passive. So we need to be a little more reasonable on the requirements. I mean, the energy code already requires a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about the passive house option with the cohort, except that, of course you have to demonstrate you meet passive house requirements, but then I don't think you have to meet any of the other requirements.
Yeah, that is saying that if you meet the passive house requirements, you meet everything else. Yeah. I just want to say, Adam, I don't know if you had anything to chime in there with your background or not. Sorry, I see you, Robert. I will come to you. I just wanted to. Oh,
Sorry about
okay.
that.
worries.
I don't have anything as far as how it relates to the cohort. So yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you though.
Okay. Robert. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. You think I would have learned by now? I wanted to ask, this is a lot of material. What did our city staff do to review all of this? Like, I realize there's summaries and high points that are in the report, and that really matches kind of some of the stuff that was in the presentation. But has someone like thoroughly reviewed all of this, or what did that look like?
Yeah. Well, I'll say first and foremost, again, I'll go back to the state's code will become the requirement next year. So at some point, that is going to become the requirement unless we do something above and beyond that. So in some ways, there's, I don't want to say a false choice, but like that one we know we're going to have to do unless we do something above and beyond that after a certain point in time. There was involvement pretty significantly from folks from across the state in that process. I will say, I mean, I sat in on the listening sessions just to be informed, but they had several listening sessions. Again, they had folks from across the industry in developing the state's code. We may or may not love everything that's in it. But we have been tracking the development of that. And then myself and Susan and staff from building services have been participating in the code cohort for the last 2.5 years. And so we have been very involved in all of the components of developing that and analyzing all of the pieces of that and really looking at areas where we think it makes sense for Longmont and doesn't make sense for Longmont. And then the report that Group 14 put together, I mean, that is part of why we did hire someone external to dig really deep into the numbers and do that kind of analysis piece. And then myself and Susan and folks from building services have reviewed that report itself. So, and our building services folks live and breathe this from one day to the next. And so, you know, we have relied, I would say, quite a bit on them to flag where they think there are things that absolutely don't make sense for us. But Susan, I saw your hand. Do you want to jump in on that?
Well, I do think you covered it. Because this is neither, you know, my wheelhouse or Lisa's, but we've definitely been involved. We didn't want to come to city council without a little bit more information. And that's why we wanted to have Group 14 do the analysis, so that we'd be able to move beyond the basic fundamentals of the code and have some other information to share. So, and we'll probably be sharing that regionally as well. I'm not sure. I don't know that anyone else has done that, but we felt like it was a step we needed to take to have a little bit more certainty.
And then my last slide, I'll pull it up right when we're wrapping up, is the next steps, which does involve our building services folks taking whatever direction we get from council next week to the development and contractor community and talking through those details and those impacts and implications, potential unintended consequences, those sorts of things, like with the folks that are, you know, directly impacted from a construction standpoint with that group of folks too. So that engagement side is not complete yet either. Ethan.
You mentioned a single health benefit, Lisa. Are there other health trade-offs with these changes?
I don't believe so. I think generally speaking, moving away from natural gas, there's a lot of air quality impacts from the extraction and combustion of natural gas, both on the extraction side and also inside the home of combusting fossil fuels inside the home. There's a lot of data that points to those health impacts. Obviously, that's driving climate change, which we know. I'm not going to say there's no impacts of electric appliances. Obviously, they have materials that require, mining and processing and all of those sorts of things as well. So nothing is without impact. I can't think off the top of my head any way of adverse environmental impacts from that transition itself. But that is a good question. I think those are all of the things that
Is there increased EMF exposure?
That's not one that's on my radar as an impact from that. That would definitely be if you're looking at those demand response or smart devices, which are not, like I said, necessarily required in this process, but I don't know if you want to jump. Oh, sorry, Alyssa, go ahead.
I was also going to add some heat pumps use HFC refrigerants, so there might be a trade-off there.
Yeah, and I do think there's a transition in the use of refrigerants in heat pumps, and refrigerants are also used in air conditioning as well. And so from a cooling standpoint, if we're looking at heat pumps versus air conditioning, I haven't done the analysis to see if one uses more or has more impact, but that is, yeah, absolutely something for sure. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to pitch Adam out again without warning, but I know that the rules are changing on the refrigerants and what's allowed and what's in the current stockpile of equipment. And, those requirements are improving over time.
Yeah, my understanding is they no longer use Freon, but Puron. Whether or not that's better or has its own impacts, I don't know. That's an area that I don't have that expertise, but I know it's an area of focus, but those are good flags. Yeah. Ethan, did you have another question or comment?
That's all for now.
Okay. Alyssa, did you have any other questions or comments?
Oh, no, sorry. I realized my hand was still raised. All good.
All right. Yeah.
I'll
Alex?
just jump in that again, definitely a huge topic, but just the general thing I wanted to say. I see that the 2024 option A and B is a good percentage decrease, not quite as strong as the bottom C and D and whatnot, all electric, but still a large percentage decrease as it is. And to just echo what Alyssa had said earlier about just sort of the resilience in the long term and the lack of knowing, right? Like we're watching an entire, so much of the world go solar without any type of true long-term historical study. So everything that we're deciding for our community is we're leaning really heavy on the negative that has been exposed in a long-term existing industry and then pretty much conjecture on the rest.
Yeah, those are all really good points. We've had similar conversations when we've brought Platte River forward, right? Of we are a community that is out in front of a lot of this, and it's an industry that has been more or less the same for 100 years, and there are a lot of those things that we don't know and that are unknowns and unintended consequences. And I think that's part of this process. Yeah, and I appreciate you all bringing those things forward. Alyssa, anything else, or is that still?
Yeah, I popped it back up again. I would just drive that point home. I know it sounds like you're taking into consideration the initial costs and the cost reductions, but I would say if there's a situation where low income households could face higher energy burdens if the electrification isn't paired with efficiency support. And I understand there's parallel pathing with grid infrastructure investments. There is the demand response incentive program that Susan spoke to earlier, but I would just continue to drive that point home is like, And at the meeting that we had with PRPA, the meetup last week, I brought this up as well, is like, it's very clear to me how this works. I'm currently a homeowner who's doing a major renovation, and this all makes sense to me within my scope of power and influence. But how do we make sure that, folks who are living in multifamily households, apartment complexes, we're including this as part of the building energy codes, which will help to enforce that. But in my mind, I think we just need to be really mindful of access and affordability, especially as we move forward on these recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. Yeah, Ethan. Oh, sorry, Susan, did you want to respond to that really quick?
Only with something that's boring and everybody gets tired of hearing about it, but new building codes or electrification or renewable energy should never distract us from the baseline energy efficiency mantra that we should all be practicing. That's the first line of defense, is conservation, and having resources available to everyone in our community, making those things accessible, is the best first step. So I agree. Thanks, Alyssa.
And just quickly, Ethan, and then I'll pass it to you. A couple of things is one, for existing homes, I'll call out our whole home health program, which Adam runs. Because the purpose of that program was to make sure that we were setting lower income households up for building electrification, especially at that time when we thought there was potential of electrification requirements for existing households at some point in the future, which may still be at some point in the future, but it's probably much more of a distant future than it may have been a couple of years ago. And that program was designed for us to make sure we could understand what are all of the potential impacts to lower income households and how do we set them up so that if and when those requirements come into place, we aren't like inadvertently pushing somebody out of their home or something like that. We're going to be wrapping up 2 years of that program at the end of this year and doing a bunch of data analysis around what we're seeing. And we'd love to bring that back to this group in particular and share that information. And then also just coming back to those annual operating costs being lower for building electrification. And we've seen folks like Habitat for Humanity who've been doing this work for the last several years because, again, you got to get over that first cost part, but then that creates additional income on a monthly basis for folks to pay for healthcare or childcare or other things that then are not going to utility bills. And so we do think that that's a pretty big benefit from an annual utility bill standpoint. Again, long-term resilience is that bigger piece, I think, that needs to be kept in mind. But yeah, Ethan.
Yeah, I think others have touched on this, but more specifically, have we analyzed how much gas consumption is being reduced at the building level from electrification versus how much gas consumption is being increased at the grid level because we're getting those new gas turbines?
All of that is I don't think that is connected to the new gas turbines, but what it does, all of the modeling that we looked at takes into account all of those things. Essentially, what are the emissions, and the emissions are coming from the fuel source that is utilized in those appliances or that equipment. So yeah, all of that was analyzed in this particular process. It doesn't look at the future. It's not looking at that's kind of a separate conversation of moving forward what we anticipate the load consumption to be, and what we anticipate our emission factors to be based on that energy mix. We are doing that in our greenhouse gas modeling and inventory that we are doing right now. So we are trying to look at those other pieces. Not part of this particular analysis. Wasn't looking for.
I think that's important to do, and to do it honestly, which means including methane, which is often overlooked.
Methane is included in our greenhouse gas inventory. It's when we look at emissions, it's CO2, metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So it rolls up all of those other greenhouse gases, which includes methane. any other questions or comments? And I'll pull up the last slide so you all can see next steps. Okay, I'm just sorry, making a note on Ethan's last comment.
Real quick, Ethan, is there any way you can move your camera around? The sun is shining right into everybody's face there. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to share the last slide with you all. Okay. Can you see the last slide that says next steps?
Yes.
Okay. So we will present this information to City Council next Tuesday, the 26th, for conversation and direction from them on what path they want to pursue. There's always kind of the do nothing option as well, which has its own implications, but and then our building services folks, depending on that direction, will take all of this to what's called the Master Board of Appeals. And if you ask me what that group does, I could not tell you. I apologize. That's but I can get that information for you. They will hold 2 stakeholder meetings again with the contractor and development community. These are tentative dates that are dropped in here. And then we'll circle back with City Council members. And then this is all through the ordinance adoption process, which requires first and second reading. So this is a tentative timeline depending on how the meeting with City Council goes next week. And that is that. If there's any other comments or questions, Robert, I will pass it off back to you.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. We'll move on the agenda to our next item, public invited to be heard. So I'd now like to open up for that. As a way of reminder for everyone, the Longmont Municipal Code, section 2.96.020 describes the powers and duties of the Sustainability Advisory Board as follows. The powers and duties shall be advisory only. The duties of the board shall be to identify topics related to environmental quality and sustainability, such as air and water quality, pollution prevention, solid waste disposal and recycling, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and green building, and to advise the City Council on plans, policies, and actions related to those topics. The City Council may request the board to consider environmental topics not specifically listed in this section and advise the council on such topics. Also includes to advise the City Council on the environmental and sustainability aspects of city plans, policies, and directives, and related goals and strategies. And then to define goals for the board and prepare work plans aligned with the board responsibilities to advise council on environmental and sustainability topics. Okay, so with that context, each person wishing to speak will be unmuted to speak one at a time. When it's your turn, please state your name and address for the record, and I will time you. You'll have 5 minutes, and we'll cut you off if you've extend beyond that. So I believe we have at least one member of the public signed up to speak.
Yes, we have Doe Kelly with us, so I'll ask her to unmute, and then Doe, once you're unmuted, if you would please just state your name and address for the record, and then you can begin.
And Doe, we cannot hear you yet.
Can you hear me?
We can now.
Yes.
Oh, okay, because my screen crashed there and I thought I'd have to get back into the call. Apparently that is not the case. Okay, my screen crashed for whatever reason. Okay, I'm Doe Kelly. I live on Barberry Drive here in Longmont. Good evening, members of the board. And first of all, I know this is a terribly complex topic and that we all want clean energy and a clean grid. I'm speaking today as a safe tech advocate in Longmont who's deeply invested in ecological integrity, public health, and transparent governance. Electrification is often framed as a climate solution, but I urge us to pause and ask, is going all electric truly the best path for Longmont, especially when we consider the full spectrum of impacts? Point A, smart meters, transparency and accountability. We were told smart meters would save energy. So I ask, number one, where can residents find a printout of the actual energy savings since the rollout's inception in 2022? Number two, based on the February 2025 SAB meeting, it appears Longmont is using more electricity, not less. What factors explain this unexpected trend? Number three, can someone from the utility please explain exactly how smart meters save energy, but not in general terms? Exactly, how does this work? Number four, is it not true that historically most savings come from educating residents about time of use pricing rather than from the meters themselves? Number five, since Longmont has fiber to the premises, an incredible advantage, why didn't we adapt our analog meters to transmit time of use data via fiber, avoiding the $14 million cost, health risks, and fire risks associated with smart meters? And last but not least, number six, is Longmont planning to become a smart city? And if so, when will there be a public disclosure? So point B, beyond smart meters, broader electrification trade-offs, what contingency plans exist if our centralized electric grid is compromised by cyber attacks, wildfires, or extreme weather? How is Longmont monitoring the ecological and health impacts of increased electromagnetic radiation, especially on pollinators and children in schools and in parks? Are we investing in decentralized energy systems like passive solar, geothermal, or microgrids such as Professor Sheckley's EMMA to build resilience and diversity? How are we protecting vulnerable residents, including our bees, bugs, and wildlife from displacement and exclusion as so-called green upgrades drive up costs and complexity and drive away or kill off our animal populations, and especially with electromagnetic radiation and all the wireless in the air? Does Longmont include a comprehensive plan for EMF, EMR, that's electromagnetic radiation, mitigation in city planning, such as buffer zones near schools, EMR-free areas in parks, biodiversity monitoring near wireless infrastructure? Point C, the global supply chains and ethical costs. Electrification depends on rare earth minerals, often mined under ecologically destructive and ethically troubling conditions. Are we factoring in these costs when we call electrification sustainable? Now, I'm not one to oppose progress, but I'm here to ask for deeper reflection, which includes using technology that's life-centric and not just based in metrics. Let's build a city that nourishes life and not just powers it. So my parting thoughts, had we thought more strategically about smart meters and electrification while using a precautionary principle and nature's wisdom along the way, is it not possible we'd have enough money in the city coffers today to fix our ailing and potholed roadways? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Doe. Heather, we did not have any other members of the public.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will continue on the agenda. The next item up is items from staff. Lisa, I think you've got unity in the community.
Yes,
Sorry to catch you at the wrong time.
I was trying to eat a sandwich. Yes, thank you. Just wanted to let folks know, if you didn't know already, Unity in the community is this Friday, the 22nd, in the downtown area between the library and the Civic Center and over there. Sustainability folks will be there and a lot of other folks from the city. So I just wanted to say, if you have time, please come by. It's a fantastic event. And then I also wanted to let folks know we are wrapping this program up now, but we do have a cooling program that's available currently with some funding. I think I've mentioned this in the past from AT&T. where we are giving away air conditioners, like window unit air conditioners for folks that are impacted by extreme heat and don't currently have in-home cooling. So we've been working with community-based partners to get those cooling units out to folks that need them. If you are interested in that program or know of somebody that could utilize that resource, please feel free to reach out to me or my colleague Zach Lance. So just wanted to give a quick shout out for that program. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure who Kristen is or Heather, if I can. I don't know if that's a member of the public. So Heather, I see.
It's a member of the public and she didn't ask to speak earlier, so we'll catch her on the next round.
Sorry, Kristen, you're more than welcome to reach out to me via phone or email if you have a question or something, and I'll touch base with you. Okay, that's it for me.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Our next agenda item is items from the board. I always want to throw in a reminder here, while we aren't able to directly engage with anyone who presented in the public invited to be heard section, this is an opportunity for us to follow up on those topics or any other topic that anyone would like to raise. So from the board member perspective. So does anyone have any items they'd like to bring up at this time? Go ahead, Ethan.
Thanks. I had the opportunity to speak with Cassie Penn. She's the district wildlife manager with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I talked to her about the birds in the area, the protected raptors, the ospreys, the bald eagles, and she was not able to join us today because she's busy today. But she is available. She said she's available next month to come and give us an update on her work and how that intersects with the city of Longmont. So I'd like to make that motion and looking for a second to invite Cassie Penn with CPW to speak with us briefly at the next meeting.
We have
a second that?
So we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Question, do we need to vote for this? I mean, I thought, we would recommend speakers coming in and enlightening us. I don't know.
So we have a series of an agenda, a rough agenda schedule of items planned. I do not believe that this is already on the agenda for our September meeting. We could certainly, if there's a second to go consider this motion and we have some debate on it, we'll then have the opportunity to kind of probe that further.
I think the motion on this should be a motion to put on a future agenda for the CPW representative to come and make a presentation on whatever it is that you're wanting to share. But I don't think that you can say that it's next month because it depends on when it works in the schedule for what is already on the work plan for you all.
Thank you for that guidance, Heather.
I'm happy to amend it to be more general, to be in the future, including next month, which will be in the future.
Alec, I saw your hand raised. Was that a procedural question you had, or were you wanting to?
I was just going to ask Ethan if it was a community member, because they can come anytime.
Well, she lives in Erie, so she's not technically a resident of Longmont.
Gotcha.
But she is a government employee who works in areas that intersect with this board and with the city of Longmont.
So I'm trying to help us be a little more parliamentary on some of the things we're doing here, and I appreciate the way you brought that motion, Ethan. I think if we want to have a debate on this topic, we should have a second to endorse that, and then we can evaluate further the merits of the motion. Is there a second? Okay. The motion fails for lack of a second. Were there any other topics or items from the board that we wish to bring forward?
I guess so. We don't again. These are new meetings. We don't respond to citizens that come and offer their space. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct. Yeah, we've gotten some advice from city legal counsel, and we've made the decision that we are not engaging with any or all members of the public directly. We have the opportunity to hear their thoughts, and then should we want to engage on any topics that we'd like to bring forward or that they have helped bring to the table, we are able to do that at this stage in the agenda.
But are they are no longer citizens in the meeting, or is she still listening?
The public is still in the meeting.
Okay,
That's
okay,
correct,
okay,
yes.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I guess I was just, that I did want to say something in relation to even I'm forgetting her name, but maybe it was close to a Dorothy or a Dorsey.
Doe Kelly was the community member's name.
Doe, yeah. And I guess, she seemed to be more than likely my elder, and potentially the elder of everybody in this room. And I guess I just wanted to call out that a question, and more directly towards city and staff, if she was heard.
And I will kind of interject there that it's really to us as the Sustainability Advisory Board, is just where that is. So if we would like to provide some additional recommendations or discussion or provide an opinion in response to that, we certainly can. Okay. Any other items from the board? All right. Seeing none, and I don't believe Councilmember Popkin was able to join us. Is that
Nope, it
correct?
doesn't look like he was able to do that today.
Okay. Well, that takes us almost to the end of the agenda. So there were a number of informational items in the packet. So if you didn't get a chance to read that big write-up from the engineering firm, make sure you have some time to dig into the nitty-gritty of those details and everything else that's in the packet. A lot of good materials in there. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? That's the next item on our agenda.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Corkett. Is there a second?
I can second that.
All right, all in favor? All those opposed? Jeff and Ethan, I did not see if your hands were up on the voting in favor. I couldn't see them in the camera
I
view.
seconded as well. So, but I'll vote in favor.
Okay. Okay. Well, that motion passes. So we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Our next meeting is September 17th. It will be remote again, a virtual meeting like this one. So I look forward to seeing all of you then. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you later.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.